everybody, welcome to number 27. I'm Jack and today I am here with a wonderful Lotus Europa. Now, not everybody likes the way that these things look, but I think that over time the design has matured. They're always going to look a little bit quirky, but I personally quite like them. Not just that, but they are very significant cars. This is one of the very first mid-engined production cars in the world. There were only two before that. There was a Mantra D-Jet, I think it was, and there was the De Tomaso Vallelunga. The Miura was released at the same time, but obviously was far less accessible. The Europa was updated throughout its life cycle. It was sold between 1966 and I think 1975. Just over 9,000 were produced. But we can divide the various models into two rough categories. So first of all, there was a Renault engine version, which was how this car was launched. It was followed by using the Lotus Ford twin cam. This is one of the Lotus Ford engine cars. But just before I tell you a little bit more about that and before we take it for a drive, just going to take you through the Renault engine version because it is quite interesting and it was what the car was originally designed for. Renault had produced a front-wheel drive car in the Renault 16. It was quite an unusual layout in that the engine had the gearbox at the front. All Lotus had to do to fit it in this car was shift it around 180 degrees. So it was a perfect design for the car. It was an all-alloy engine, so it was very light. There was one downside though in doing that, in that the car would have ended up with 4 reverse gears and 1 forward gear. And really cleverly, what Lotus did is that they swapped round in the gearbox the crown wheel on the differential from one side to the other, thus turning it back to 4 front-facing gears and 1 reverse. That engine as standard only put out about 62 horsepower, but with a bit of fettling, some bigger valves, different timing, higher compression, Lotus got it to put out 82 horsepower. Those early versions of the Europa only weighed about 620 kilos, so it was still fairly sprightly. About 9.5 seconds, 0 to 60, 115 miles an hour top speed. But they were also very, very sparse. The interior didn't have much trim. They were sort of pared down to the bone. By 1971, or was it 72, Lotus fitted the Cortina-derived iron block with the Lotus head engine in it. As standard, that produced 105 horsepower. It still used the same Renault gearbox, and this is the car that we have here today. In typical Lotus fashion for the time, the chassis was a backbone of folded steel. Front suspension was double wishbone with a coilover shock, and at the back we had the famous Chapman strut. So with this being so small and dainty, and being Lotus's first mid-engine car, I think we can say that it's kind of the precursor to the Lotus Elise, a car that, as most of you know, I absolutely adore. And I think all that remains is to take it for a drive and see what it's actually like. So inside it's quite an interesting story because getting in and out isn't as bad as in my Elise, but the steering wheel gets in the way a little bit for someone who's quite tall like me. But once you're sort of cocooned in there, again, true to Lotus, absolutely perfect driving position. The wheel, the gear stick, everything is exactly where you want it. The gearbox, however, is a little bit of a bugger. So we'll talk about that more in a minute. But although there isn't much room, it really is very, very comfortable. The seat, you're slightly reclined on it. It hugs my body perfectly. So I think it's because of my body shape as well that it works. I don't know people with different sizes or shapes, but for me, it is supremely comfortable. You've got your arm, you sort of rest it here. It would make quite a good long distance car. It is a little bit noisy, it is a bit sporty, but it is very, very comfortable. Now, The pedal box is an area that doesn't work so well. It is incredibly cramped and there is absolutely nowhere for my clutch foot to rest when it's not on the clutch. So you just kind of have to hold it above the clutch, which is far from ideal. Also, the spacing on the pedals means heel and toeing, stuff like that, isn't going to work for me. The top of my shoe touches the steering column as well. So not brilliant. Again, I'm sure it's something that you'd probably get used to. Now it's funny because in 1972, when Autocar tested one of these, they tested the Special, so that was one of the later versions with the alloy wheels, the big valve engine, but the interior was pretty much as this one is. And it's funny because in that review they comment that the interior feels quite upmarket, which is quite astounding when you look at how bare it is, but I suppose things were different in those days. The good thing is though that the switchgear, well, there's hardly any switchgear. So there's, you know, the window controls here, there's the wipers, on the right hand side there's the indicator, you've got your gearbox, you've got a heater control there, a little valve that you pull open and close, which is quite funny. But that's about it. Nothing to distract you. Right, let's do a bit of a pull. The engine is the small valve version, so the first sort of 105 horsepower, and it feels like plenty. It's not fast, but it's quite torquey. It's got lots of mid-range. It does go up to 6.5, but I don't find there's really much point revving it to that. I'd say that going up to 6, even 5.5 is plenty good enough. And even from 3,000 revs, it pulls really nicely. Feels like it's in the torque. You can feel those carbs sucking the air in as you're going down the road. And let me tell you that, oh my God, the steering on this car is simply freaky. It is unreal. I've never experienced anything quite like it. Now, oddly, I'll talk to you about the steering in a second, but just there, for a mid-engined car like this, if you go too quick into a corner, once you get past the limit, it just sort of pushes forward. I don't know if perhaps if you let go of the throttle at that point, if it was to go into sort of a snap oversteer, it doesn't feel like it. The back end feels completely tied down and the front just washes out really gradually if you go too quick. But back to that steering, because it is astounding. It's one of two things about this car, which is simply astounding. How to describe it? It's got a bit of weight to it, but it is light, but it's got enough weight that you get a lot of feel from it. But off center, feels like it might be a bit vague, but that's the way it feels. But it isn't, because what happens is that as you turn the wheel, the car, before you've even thought about it, has already turned. It is simply freaky. It's incredible. It really is. So it takes delicacy to a complete other level. It does remind me a little bit of the Elan that I drove, which is a contemporary of this. But I think this takes it to an even different level. The other thing which is just incredible is, now this road is a car killer. It is so bumpy. And there are cars that deal with it terribly and it sort of, you can feel it sort of takes the chassis apart. And there's cars that deal with it well. And then there is this. This just kills this road. I don't know what, I'm shocked. It treats this road as if it was a normal, perfectly flat road. It's not floaty in the way that a good Citroen, for example, would kill this road by floating over it. It's really well controlled, but the bumps just don't do anything to it at all. This is another sort of tight corner. I went in on a trailing throttle, wrong Wrong gear, so let's forget what happened there. My brilliant driving. We'll try that again on the way back. Because yeah, tight corners, I think as I've seen even on something that wasn't quite as tight, it just sort of pushes out. The road is quite wet. Well, this bit isn't, but most of the other bits, the bits where I went wide before, was a little bit slimy, so it could be that on a dry road it'll have a bit more grip, because at the moment it doesn't feel like it has a huge amount. Now here we go, here's a left-hander turn, and it kind of just does it for you. What a freaky car. It just floats over everything, but it floats in the way it turns in. It's undescribable. I cannot describe it to you. Oh, it's gone into fourth again. That gearbox is tricky. Right, second gear. This is an off camber, quite tricky. And again, as you're pushing through, you can feel that it's the front that will let go before the back. So I think I took this out for a spin, as I tend to do before doing the filming, to get used to it. And the gearbox is feeling a bit better. Even when you get used to where the ratios are though, it is quite heavy and it is a little bit lumpy. So that doesn't really fit in with the character of the rest of the car, because it's so live, it's so delicate. The steering anyway doesn't quite tally in with the rest of the controls. The clutch on this is a little bit sticky, but there's a cable, so it probably, I would imagine, just needs fettling a little bit. The brakes feel pretty good. I haven't really tested them, but they have reasonably good feel. They're discs at the front, drums at the rear. But what is so freakish, and I'm sorry to keep telling you this, but it's just worth telling, is just how good this car is in terms of handling. It is simply astounding. If you're one of those people that has always dismissed these because you think that, well, they just look like a warped bread van, well, you are missing out. They are simply incredible. Personally, I don't mind the looks. I think I can understand why some people don't like them. The proportions a little bit odd. It's got some detailing which is odd. It's not a cohesive design, but on the whole, it's quite a lithe little mid-engine car. I quite like it. This sort of front, the way the screen sort of wipes around as well, I definitely like. It goes onto the side windows, and the side windows are even. The tops of them isn't straight. They're sort of scalloped in the middle so that they fit into that roof line, into that design. The seat is just so comfortable. It is perfect. It's just a shame that the pedals mean that I can't rest my feet. Otherwise, it would make a really brilliant little tourer. The other thing that's surprising about this is just how together it feels. And it's got 50,000 miles on it. It's a 1971 car, I think, or a 72. There's no rattles. That's also because the suspension is so compliant, but it doesn't feel like a really shoddily put together car. Maybe the one downside about this telepathic steering is that maybe it feels like there's a little bit of instability at higher speeds. That could also be just that the geometry on this car needs looking at. That's more than possible, or it could be a trade-off of that incredible steering. There's nothing like it. Nothing that I've ever experienced. Incredible thing. When new, these were about £2,700, which is about £30,000 today. So they were expensive things. And they still managed to make about 9,000. The looks obviously are a bit Marmite. But to sum up, an incredible car, really incredible. And if I had the opportunity of choosing between one of these and an Elan, you know, I don't know which one I would go for. Because the Elan's got a better gearbox. Maybe in a way it feels a little bit more delicate than this. The gearbox does make a bit of a difference. I'm getting used to it now. But I think that the steering on this is beyond even an Elan, and an Elan is absolutely legendary, and also the way this handled that road. There's no word for it, I'm sorry, but there's no car, modern or old, that I have been in which handles that road quite in the same way. One last thing that I'm going to tell you about while we were talking about the design, which is quite incredible, is that it may be a design that you love or hate, but the person who did this, I've forgotten his name now, I think Ron Dixon, might be wrong on that, but anyway, he is the same person who did another absolutely classic design. You will know it if you're from the UK, and that is the Black & Decker Workmate. I think that was done in the 60s or 70s, and I know it's not a car, but an iconic design, and I don't know, that's a weird little fact for you that I wanted to throw in at the end. Thank you all so much for watching. It's been a great day. What a great car this is. And if you've got an interesting car that you want me to do a review on, please do get in touch. Instagram is the best way. Please do subscribe if you can. It really helps the channel. And I look forward to seeing you for the next video.